My dad gave my brother my VP position and called me a failure. I resigned, leaving them with the server keys. They forgot I controlled. After the system crashed, they begged me to return. I told them my rate was 50% of the company. Hey Reddit, grab a snack because this is going to be a long one. I'm still processing everything that happened, but I needed to share this somewhere because, honestly, it's the most satisfying thing I've ever experienced in my 31 years on this planet. So I, 31 male, just destroyed my family's business. Not on purpose at first, but when they handed me the detonator and begged me to press the button, I figured why not? They had it coming. Let me back up and give you some context about the Johnson family dynamic, because without it, this story makes no sense. My dad started Johnson Industrial Solutions about 25 years ago. Started in our garage with a couple computers and a dream, grew it into a legitimate mid-sized company specializing in industrial automation software. We're talking about systems that run manufacturing plants, distribution operations, supply chain management, the kind of software that, if it goes down, entire factories stop producing and companies start hemorrhaging money by the hour. Our client base included 3 Fortune 500 companies and about 40 mid-sized manufacturers across the Midwest. Growing up, I was always the tech kid. While other kids were playing sports or chasing each other around the playground, I was in the garage with Dad, learning how servers worked, how networks connected, how to write code that actually did something useful. By the time I was 15, I was helping troubleshoot client issues after school. By 18, I was basically running our IT infrastructure as an unpaid intern while finishing high school. I still remember the first time I saved the company from a major disaster. I was 17 years old, home on summer break, when our main database server started throwing corruption errors. Dad was panicking, calling expensive consultants who couldn't figure out the problem. I sat down at the terminal, spent 6 hours tracing the issue, and found a memory leak in a third-party module we were using. Fixed it myself. Saved the company probably $50,000 in emergency consulting fees and potential client losses. Dad's response? A pat on the shoulder and good work, sport. No bonus, no recognition, nothing. Just business as usual. My younger brother Kevin? He was the golden child, the charming one, the one who played football, got the girls, made our parents proud in all the visible ways that relatives could see at Christmas dinner. He was 3 years younger than me, but somehow always managed to be the center of attention. Kevin had this natural charisma that I never developed. He could walk into a room, and everyone would gravitate toward him. He told stories that made people laugh. He remembered names and details about people's lives. He had this effortless way of making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world. Me? I was awkward. Still am. Honestly. I preferred computers to people because computers made sense. They followed rules. They didn't play favorites or make you feel invisible. The favoritism started early and never stopped. When I got straight A's, my parents nodded and said, "That's expected." When Kevin scraped by with C's, they threw him a pizza party for trying so hard. When I built my first server rack at 16 from salvaged parts I'd collected from electronics recyclers, Dad barely looked up from the TV. When Kevin scored the winning touchdown at some JV game, Dad was crying tears of joy in the stands. You get the picture. Classic golden child situation that would make any family dynamics expert cringe. The pattern continued through every milestone of my life. When I got accepted to State's computer science program with a partial scholarship, my parents said it was a good practical choice. When Kevin got accepted to a private university that cost 3 times as much, they threw him a graduation party with catering and invited half the neighborhood. After high school, I went to State for computer science, paid my own way through scholarships and part-time work because Dad said the company couldn't afford to help with tuition. Meanwhile, Kevin went to that private university where he majored in business administration and minored in frat parties. Full ride from the bank of Mom and Dad. I worked 25 hours a week during the school year to cover my expenses. Kevin called home whenever he needed spending money, and it appeared in his account within hours. I graduated with honors and minimal debt because I'd busted my rear end. Kevin graduated with a C+ average and a sense of entitlement that would make a trust fund baby blush. 4 years later, I graduated with honors and immediately started working at Johnson Industrial Solutions full-time. Started at the bottom despite literally building half our systems during my teenage years. Fine, whatever. I figured I'd prove myself and work my way up. And I did. Over the next 8 years, I became the backbone of that company. I'm not being arrogant here. I'm stating facts that multiple employees would verify if you asked them. I designed our entire server architecture from scratch, created the security protocols that protected client data, wrote custom software solutions that landed us 3 of our biggest contracts. When our main competitor tried to poach our clients with a fancy cloud-based solution, I built something better in 6 months. Single-handedly. while also managing our existing infrastructure. There was this one time, about 4 years in, when we almost lost our biggest client, a manufacturing company that accounted for 22% of our revenue. Their CTO was shopping for alternatives because our reporting dashboard was outdated. I spent 3 weeks working 18-hour days building a completely new analytics platform, custom visualizations, real-time monitoring, predictive maintenance alerts. The CTO was so impressed he signed a 5-year contract extension. Dad mentioned it in a company meeting as a nice technical upgrade, without using my name. Kevin, who had literally no involvement, somehow got thanked for relationship management that kept the client happy. Dad promoted me to Director of Technology after 5 years. Still not VP, but okay. I figured I was building towards something. The title came with a modest raise and an office with a window. I told myself to be patient. I told myself hard work would eventually be recognized. I told myself that family loyalty meant something. I was wrong about all of it. Then Kevin graduated. This was 3 years ago. Kevin had bounced around after college, tried a couple sales jobs, failed at a startup that Dad quietly funded and never mentioned again. At 25, he was basically unemployed and living in an apartment that our parents paid for. The startup failure was particularly embarrassing. Kevin had convinced Dad to invest $60,000 in a revolutionary app that was supposed to connect party planners with local vendors. The app was essentially a worse version of Yelp with a party theme. It launched, got maybe 200 downloads, and died within 8 months. Dad never asked for the money back, never even mentioned it. Meanwhile, I'd been asking for a modest equipment budget increase for 2 years and kept getting told the company couldn't afford it. Dad's solution to Kevin's unemployment? Bring Kevin into the company as my equal, Director of Business Development, a position that literally didn't exist until Kevin needed a job. I swallowed my pride. Fine. Kevin could handle the business side while I handled the tech side. Division of labor. Made sense on paper. Except Kevin was terrible at his job. Like, genuinely bad. He'd schedule meetings with potential clients and then forget to show up. He'd promise features our software couldn't deliver without consulting me first. He'd take prospects to fancy restaurants on the company card and then lose the deal anyway. I watched him blow a deal worth potentially $200,000 in annual revenue because he promised the client we could integrate with a legacy system that didn't have API access. When the client's technical team asked how we'd accomplish this, Kevin just said, "Our tech guy will figure it out," and moved on. The client walked away because they correctly identified that Kevin had no idea what he was talking about. But Dad couldn't see it, or wouldn't see it. Every failure was a learning experience, or building relationships for the long term. Every success, even minor ones, was proof that Kevin was finding his stride. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks keeping the technical side running while cleaning up Kevin's messes with clients he'd overpromised. Got the same salary I'd had for 2 years. Same title, same office. When I asked Dad about advancement, he gave me this condescending smile and said, "David, technical people don't usually move into leadership. You're valuable exactly where you are. Don't worry about titles. Don't worry about titles." Right. Easy to say when your last name is on the building. What really got me was the server room situation. Our entire company ran on infrastructure I had designed, built, and maintained. Every piece of software, every client database, every communication system, every backup protocol. I knew every password, every encryption key, every failsafe. Nobody else did because nobody else had ever bothered to learn. I'd tried training people multiple times. I created documentation that nobody read. I offered to run workshops that nobody attended. I practically begged for a junior admin who could learn the systems and provide backup coverage. But Dad always said we couldn't afford to dedicate resources to IT training when there were more pressing business needs. Translation: Kevin needed a bigger marketing budget for client dinners that went nowhere. So for 8 years, I was the single point of failure for the entire company. The only person who could access our core systems. The only one who knew how everything connected. And nobody seemed to care about that vulnerability because, in their minds, I'd always be there. I'd always be the reliable one. The one who fixed problems without complaint. The invisible backbone of Johnson Industrial Solutions. That was about to change. 6 months ago, Dad called a company-wide meeting. "Big announcement," he said. "Time for Johnson Industrial Solutions to enter a new phase of growth." I figured it was going to be some new contract announcement, or maybe a merger discussion. Instead, Dad stood at the front of our conference room with Kevin beside him and dropped a bomb. "After careful consideration, I've decided it's time to restructure our leadership team. We're creating a new vice president of operations position to oversee both our technical and business development divisions. Someone who can bridge both worlds and lead us into the future." My heart started racing. Vice President. After 8 years of proving myself, finally getting recognized. I'm proud to announce that Kevin will be taking on this role, effective immediately. The room went silent. I watched as my coworkers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Jake, my closest work friend, actually winced. Everyone knew Kevin couldn't find the server room without a map, let alone oversee technical operation. Kevin stood there grinning like he'd just won the lottery. That same smile he'd had when he got the car for his 16th birthday, while I was driving a 12-year-old sedan I'd bought myself. That same smile he'd had at every Christmas when his pile of presents was twice the size of mine. Dad continued with some nonsense about Kevin's business acumen and relationship-building skills being essential for the company's growth. How Kevin's fresh perspective would complement our technical capabilities. How this was about the future of Johnson Industrial Solutions. When he finished, Kevin said a few words about being honored and committed to excellence. The same generic phrases he'd probably pulled from some business book he never finished reading. I sat there frozen. 8 years. 8 years of 60-hour weeks, of building systems from nothing, of saving contracts Kevin nearly lost, of being the backbone of this entire operation. And my reward was watching my younger brother get promoted over me. After the meeting, I went to Dad's office. I needed to understand what was happening. He was sitting behind his desk looking satisfied with himself when I walked in. Dad, I need to talk to you about this VP decision. He sighed like I was a child interrupting his important adult time. David, I know this might be hard to hear, but Kevin's been showing real leadership potential lately. The company needs someone who can see the big picture. Big picture? I've been seeing the big picture for 8 years. I built the systems that make this company function. And you'll continue to do that. You're invaluable in your current role. My current role that Kevin is now in charge of? Kevin will handle the strategic direction. You'll handle the technical implementation. It's a natural partnership. Dad, Kevin doesn't understand our systems. He couldn't tell you the difference between a server and a sandwich. Dad's face hardened. That's exactly the kind of attitude that concerns me, David. You're technically gifted, but you lack the people skills to lead. Kevin brings something different to the table. What does he bring exactly? Failed sales pitches? Missed meetings? That startup you funded that went bankrupt in 8 months? That's enough. Dad stood up, his face red. I've made my decision. Kevin is VP. You can either support that decision and continue being a valuable member of this team, or you can let your jealousy destroy your career here. Jealousy? Dad, I've given everything to this company. I've missed holidays, canceled vacations, worked through illnesses. I've been here every single time there was a crisis, at any hour, on any day. You've given your technical skills, which is exactly what we pay you for. But leadership requires more than just knowing how computers work. Kevin has vision. He has charisma. He has what it takes to be the face of this company. I stood there processing his words. The face of the company. That's what this was about. Kevin looked good in a suit and could shake hands with clients. I was the awkward tech guy who actually made everything work. You think I can't lead because I'm not charming enough? I think you're a brilliant technician who should focus on what you do best. Stop trying to be something you're not. That's been your problem since childhood, David. You always wanted to be something you weren't instead of accepting who you are. That one hit different. 20+ years of feeling invisible in my own family, condensed into one condescending sentence. I walked out of his office without another word, went straight to my car and sat there for an hour, replaying every sacrifice I'd made for that company. Every weekend I'd worked, every vacation I'd skipped, every relationship I'd neglected because there was always another crisis to solve. And my reward was being called a brilliant technician who should know his place. That night, I called my girlfriend Rachel. She'd been listening to me complain about my family for 3 years and had the patience of a saint. She was a nurse, worked in the ICU at University Medical Center, and she understood long hours and feeling underappreciated. They promoted Kevin over you. Yep, the Kevin who thought SQL was a type of fish until last year? That's the one. David, what are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'm done being invisible. Those words surprised me even as I said them, but they felt right. For the first time in my life, I was done accepting whatever scraps my family decided to throw me. The next few weeks were educational. Kevin started his new role with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop, calling meetings to discuss synergy and operational efficiency, while clearly having no idea what any of our systems actually did. He'd pull me into his office to explain basic concepts that anyone who'd been paying attention for the last 3 years would already know. What's a firewall? How does our backup system work? Why can't we just move everything to Google Drive? I'd explain things as simply as I could, and he'd nod like he understood. Then he'd turn around and present those same concepts to Dad like they were his original insights. I've been analyzing our infrastructure, And I think we're over-reliant on localized server solutions. We should consider a distributed approach to risk management. That was literally my words from a proposal I'd written 2 years ago. A proposal Dad had rejected because it was too technical for him to understand. Dad ate it up. Every meeting, he'd praise Kevin's strategic thinking, while I sat there watching my own ideas get repackaged and credited to someone else. But here's where things got interesting. Kevin decided he wanted to modernize our infrastructure. He'd read some article about cloud computing and decided we needed to migrate everything immediately. Never mind that our clients had specific security requirements that made certain cloud solutions problematic. Never mind that our current systems were stable and efficient. Kevin wanted cloud because cloud sounded impressive. He brought in outside consultants without consulting me. These guys showed up with fancy presentations and buzzwords, promising to revolutionize our operations. They quoted a price tag that made my eyes water, $350,000, and a timeline that was completely unrealistic. When I raised concerns in the planning meeting, Kevin cut me off. David, I appreciate your input, but we need to think bigger here. Your legacy systems have served us well, but it's time to evolve. Legacy systems. The systems I'd built from scratch. The systems that had never had a major outage in 8 years. Kevin, if we rush this migration, we're going to have serious problems. Our clients depend on uptime. Any disruption could cost us contracts. That's why we're bringing in professionals. He gestured to the consultants, who nodded sagely. These guys have done this dozens of times. We're in good hands. I looked at Dad, hoping he'd see reason. He was nodding along with Kevin like everything made perfect sense. I want David fully cooperative with the transition team, Kevin continued. That means handing over all system access, documentation, and passwords so they can do their assessment. There it was. The moment everything crystallized. They wanted my keys, not because they valued my input, but because they needed my access to proceed with a plan that would probably blow up in their faces. For 8 years, I'd been the gatekeeper of this company's most critical infrastructure. I knew every backdoor, every encryption key, every fail-safe protocol. Information I'd never fully documented because Dad had always said we couldn't afford to dedicate resources to that kind of administrative overhead. Now they wanted me to hand all that over to outside consultants so Kevin could play tech visionary. I smiled and said I'd prepare everything they needed. Then I went back to my office and started planning. Over the next 2 weeks, I did 3 things. First, I documented everything. Every system I'd built, every process I'd created, every line of code that kept the company running. Not for them, for me. I wanted a complete record of exactly what I'd contributed before everything went sideways. Second, I started quietly backing up my personal files and any proprietary work I'd developed on my own time. Legal had always been vague about IP ownership for stuff I'd built outside working hours, so I made sure I had copies of everything that was clearly mine. Third, I began preparing my resignation. This wasn't revenge yet. This was self-preservation. I knew Kevin's cloud migration was going to be a disaster, and I didn't want to be the scapegoat when it failed. Better to leave on my own terms than get blamed for someone else's incompetence. The final straw came on a Thursday afternoon. Kevin called another all-hands meeting, this time to discuss organizational restructuring. Dad was there, beaming with pride as Kevin presented a new org chart. My position had been eliminated. Well, not eliminated exactly. Restructured. The Director of Technology role was being replaced with a Technical Support Coordinator position, reporting to the outside consulting team. Same responsibility. Lower title. 20% pay cut. And I'd be reporting to people who'd been at the company for 3 weeks instead of 8 years. After the meeting, Dad pulled me aside. David, I know this seems like a step back, but think of it as an opportunity. You'll be working closely with experienced professionals who can help you grow. Help me grow? Dad, I built everything they're supposedly experts in. Your attitude is exactly the problem. You're resistant to change. You think you know better than everyone else. That's why you've plateaued here. That's why you've never advanced past a certain level. You're a technician, David, a good one, but you're not a leader, and you need to accept that. Plateaued? I've been running your IT infrastructure single-handedly, while Kevin couldn't find the printer without a map. Kevin is a leader. You're a technician. There's no shame in that. But you need to accept your place in this company. My place. My place was apparently as a glorified help desk employee at my own family's company, while my brother, who could barely send an email without assistance, played executive. Is this really how you see me? I asked quietly. After everything I've done? Dad looked at me with something like pity. David, I love you, but you've never had what it takes to lead. You're good at following instructions and solving technical problems. That's valuable. But Kevin has the charisma, the vision, the leadership qualities that this company needs to grow. I know it's hard to hear, but sometimes we have to recognize our limitations. I just stared at him. The new position comes with a retention bonus if you commit to staying through the transition. $15,000. We really do need you for the technical handoff. Think about it. He walked away, leaving me standing in the hallway, realizing that I'd spent 8 years building a company for people who saw me as nothing more than a useful tool. That night, I typed up my resignation letter. 2 paragraphs. Professional, courteous, and effective in 2 weeks. Then I deleted it and wrote another one. This one was 1 sentence. I resign. Effective immediately. I submitted it at 6 a.m. the next morning. Emailed it to Dad, Kevin, and HR. Then I turned off my phone, drove to Rachel's apartment, and slept for 14 hours straight. When I finally woke up, I had 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. The panic had begun. Here's the thing about being the only person who knows how all the systems work. When you leave, nobody else can fix anything. And I mean anything. Day 1 of my absence, the backup server started throwing errors. This was actually a minor issue, a scheduled maintenance task that needed manual approval because I'd never automated that particular step. Would have taken me 5 minutes to resolve. Without me, nobody knew what to do. They called the consulting team, who spent 8 hours trying to diagnose the problem before accidentally making it worse by restarting services in the wrong order. Day 2, the email server went down. Not because anything was actually broken, but because nobody knew the admin credentials to restart the service. Those credentials were in my head, along with about 200 other passwords that I'd never been asked to document. The consultants tried to reset the password and managed to lock themselves out entirely. Day 3, their biggest client called threatening to terminate their contract because their monitoring dashboard had stopped updating. This was a result of an API token that needed to be refreshed every 90 days. I'd always handled it. Nobody else even knew it existed. Jake kept me updated through texts. He wasn't asking for help. He understood why I left, but he wanted me to know what was happening. I appreciated the play-by-play. Kevin just spent 45 minutes screaming at the consultants. It was glorious. Dad is in his office with the door closed. Haven't seen him come out in 3 hours. The consultants are talking about bringing in a forensic data recovery team. They think we might have been hacked. They hadn't been hacked. They just finally realized that maybe the guy who built everything from scratch knew things that weren't written down anywhere. My phone was blowing up. Dad, Kevin, HR, coworkers I barely knew. Everyone wanted to know where I was and why I wasn't helping. I ignored all of it. On day 4, Dad showed up at Rachel's apartment. I watched him through the peephole, knocking and calling my name for 20 minutes before finally. He left a handwritten note under the door. David, please call me. We can work this out. Dad. I threw the note away. Day 5, Kevin sent me an email threatening legal action for sabotage and theft of company property. I forwarded it to a lawyer friend who laughed and said they had nothing. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I just left. The fact that I was the only one who knew how things worked wasn't my problem. I hadn't deleted anything, hadn't damaged anything, hadn't taken anything that belonged to the company. I just stopped showing up. Day 6, the company's main production server crashed. This was the big one, the server that hosted all their client applications. Without it, half their customer base had no access to the software they were paying for. The crash happened because of a memory management issue I'd set up a monitoring alert for years ago. The alert had been going to my email, my personal email, because I'd never trusted anyone else to respond to it properly. When I left, the alerts kept coming, but nobody was there to see them. I watched the emails roll in as the server slowly degraded over 72 hours before finally giving up. Jake texted me in a panic. David, everything is on fire. Kevin's been in Dad's office screaming for 2 hours. The consultants are saying they can't recover the system without the encryption keys. Nobody knows where they are. I knew where they were. They were in a password manager that only I had access to. A password manager secured by credentials that existed solely in my memory. Day 7, Dad called. I actually answered this time. David, his voice was hoarse. He sounded like he hadn't slept in days. We need to talk. We talked plenty. You made your thoughts about me very clear. I was wrong. About Kevin. About the restructuring. About everything. Please. The company is falling apart. We need your help. Sounds like you should call those consultants Kevin hired. They're professionals, right? David, please, I'm begging you. Name your price. My price? Whatever you want. Your old position back. Double your salary. VP title. Anything. Just come back and fix this. I let the silence stretch out for a long time. Long enough that I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end, waiting. I don't want my old position back, Dad. Then what do you want? 50% of the company. He laughed, then realized I wasn't joking. That's insane. That's my life's work. I can't just give away half of it. Then good luck with your server recovery. I hear the consultants are making great progress. David, Be reasonable. I'll give you 25%. That's more than generous for your age and experience. 50%. And Kevin goes, completely out. No position, no office, no involvement. Clean break. I can't fire your brother. He's family. So am I. But that didn't stop you from calling me a failure who should know his place. Silence. Long, painful silence. 50% and Kevin out. Final offer. You have until midnight to decide. After that, I'm booking a flight to Seattle. I have 3 job offers waiting and I haven't even started looking seriously. I hung up. The next 18 hours were interesting. I know this because Jake kept me updated in real time. The consultants quit, just walked out, said the situation was beyond their capability to resolve without access credentials they couldn't obtain. They also mentioned something about not wanting to be associated with the company when it collapsed. 2 major clients terminated their contracts. 3 employees resigned because they couldn't do their jobs without functioning systems. The company's bank called about a missed loan payment that had been scheduled through an automated system nobody could access. Kevin apparently had a complete meltdown in the parking lot, screaming about how this was all my fault and how I'd planned this from the beginning. Security had to escort him off the premises. At 11:47 p.m., my phone rang. 50%. Dad's voice was broken. Kevin's out. Whatever you want, just please come back. I want it in writing. Lawyer drafted agreement, signed and notarized before I touch a single keyboard. We don't have time for that. The servers? Then I guess the servers stay down. I'll wait for the paperwork. David, please. We're losing everything. Midnight, Dad. Papers ready by noon tomorrow or the deal's off. I hung up again. At 11:58 a.m. the next day, I received an email with 3 attachments. A stock transfer agreement giving me 50% ownership of Johnson Industrial Solutions, Kevin's termination letter, and a formal apology letter from my father acknowledging his errors in judgment regarding my contributions to the company. My lawyer reviewed everything. It was legitimate. I drove to the office at 2 p.m., walked past the empty reception desk, past the darkened workstation, past the stressed-out employees who looked at me like I was either their savior or their executioner. Dad was waiting in his office. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week. Kevin was there too, packing personal items into a cardboard box while shooting daggers at me with his eyes. David. Dad stood up. I don't know what to say except I'm sorry. I was blind. I let my desire to see Kevin succeed cloud my judgment about who was really holding this company together. Save it. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to fix the mess you created. Kevin looked up from his box. This isn't over. You think you won? But you just destroyed this family? No, Kevin. You and Dad destroyed this family. I just stopped letting you destroy me along with it. He grabbed his box and walked out without another word. I never saw him at the office again. I sat down at my old workstation and got to work. It took me 4 hours to restore basic functionality, another 6 to get all systems fully operational. By midnight, Johnson Industrial Solutions was running again. But things were different now. Very different. Over the next 3 months, I implemented changes I'd been advocating for years. Proper documentation for all systems. Redundant access credentials held by multiple trusted employees. Training programs so I wasn't a single point of failure anymore. Professional IT staff who actually understood our infrastructure. I also restructured the company. Dad stepped back to an advisory role. I became CEO. We cut the dead weight, focused on our core competencies, and started rebuilding relationships with the clients we'd lost. Kevin tried to sue for wrongful termination. His lawyer laughed him out of the office when he reviewed the situation. You can't sue for wrongful termination when your termination was part of a negotiated agreement to save a company you helped destroy. The lawsuit attempt was actually pretty funny. Kevin hired some ambulance chaser attorney who sent us a cease and desist letter claiming I had coerced Dad into signing the agreement under duress. My lawyer responded with a 12-page breakdown of everything Kevin had done to damage the company, including the failed cloud migration, the lost clients, and the security vulnerabilities his consultants had created. We also included transcripts of Kevin's parking lot meltdown that several employees had recorded on their phones. The lawsuit disappeared within 2 weeks. Never heard another word about it. What surprised me most was how quickly the company culture changed once Kevin was gone. Employees who had been walking on eggshells suddenly started speaking up in meetings. Ideas that had been shot down for years got implemented. Morale went through the roof. Jake told me that on Kevin's last day, someone had left a cake in the break room with a note that said, "Good riddance." Nobody ever figured out who did it, but I had my suspicions. The clients we'd lost during the crisis were harder to win back. 2 of them had signed with competitors and weren't interested in returning. But the third one, a manufacturing company we'd worked with for 6 years, agreed to give us another chance after I personally flew out to their headquarters and walked them through everything that had happened. Your brother really screwed you over, their CTO said after I finished explaining. He did, but he's gone now, and I'm making sure nothing like this ever happens again. We got their contract back, signed a 3-year extension on better terms than before. The financial recovery took about 4 months. Between the lost clients, the emergency consulting fees, and the damage to our reputation, we'd taken a serious hit. I had to personally guarantee a bridge loan to keep payroll running while we rebuilt. But we did rebuild, stronger than before. I brought in new people, competent people. Patricia as CTO, a CFO named William, who had actual financial experience instead of just a business degree and family connection. A sales director named Samantha, who closed more deals in her first quarter than Kevin had closed in 2 years. We also invested heavily in documentation and training. I never wanted to be a single point of failure again. Not because I was planning to leave, but because I finally understood that a company built around one person's knowledge isn't really a company. It's a liability. By month 6, we were profitable again. By month 9, we were posting record revenues. By month 12, we had more clients than we'd ever had before. The turnaround got noticed. Industry publications wrote about our Phoenix from the Ashes story. A podcast invited me on to talk about resilience and leadership. I declined the podcast but appreciated the recognition. TLDR. Spent 8 years building my family's tech company. Dad promoted my useless brother over me and called me a failure who should know his place. I quit, taking all the system access with me. When everything crashed, I demanded 50% ownership to come back. Now I run the company and my brother sells cars. Update. Hey Reddit. It's been about 6 months since I posted this, and people have been asking for an update. The company just had its best quarter ever. We brought in a new CTO who I actually respect, a woman named Patricia, who spent 15 years at a Fortune 100 company before deciding she wanted to work somewhere smaller. We've landed 3 major contracts this year, hired 12 new employees, and expanded into 2 new markets. The biggest contract was with an automotive parts manufacturer based out of Detroit. They'd been shopping for a new software solution for over a year, and every major competitor had pitched them. When they heard about our turnaround story, they reached out directly, said they appreciated a company that had been through the fire and come out stronger. That contract alone is worth more than our entire revenue from 2 years ago. Rachel and I got married last month. Small ceremony, just close friends and her family. Dad was the only one from my side who came. Kevin wasn't invited. The wedding was actually perfect. We did it at a botanical garden about an hour outside the city. 50 people, good food, great weather, no drama. Rachel's family is completely normal, which after my family feels almost surreal. Her dad walked her down the aisle. Her mom cried happy tears. Her sisters gave actually heartfelt toasts. Nobody tried to make it about themselves or start a fight. Dad behaved himself. He sat in the back row, kept to himself, and left right after the reception started winding down. He shook my hand before he left and said he was proud of me. I just nodded. Speaking of Kevin, I heard through the grapevine that he tried to start his own consulting business after getting fired. Some kind of business development service where he'd help startups find investors. It lasted about 4 months before he ran out of Dad's money to burn. Apparently the investors he was connecting weren't real, and the startups figured that out pretty quickly. One of the startups actually threatened to sue him for fraud. Kevin had been taking a finder's fee for introductions to investors who didn't exist. The whole thing collapsed when someone actually Googled one of the investors Kevin had mentioned and found nothing. He's at a car dealership now, selling used trucks from what I heard, making about $40,000 a year. A far cry from the VP salary he thought he deserved. Dad officially retired last month. He signed over his remaining shares to me as part of a buyout agreement we'd been negotiating. I now own 73% of Johnson Industrial Solutions. He moved to Arizona with Mom. Before he left, we had dinner together, just the 2 of us. He told me that watching me take control of the company was the proudest he'd ever been of me. Then he apologized again for how he'd treated me all those years. I always thought Kevin needed more help because he struggled more, he said. I didn't realize I was just making him weaker while ignoring the son who was actually building something. I appreciated the apology, but I also told him that apologies don't change history. They just acknowledge it. He nodded like he understood. Mom still tries to arrange family dinners where Kevin happens to show up. I've stopped attending those. Last Thanksgiving, she called me crying because I wouldn't come. I told her I loved her, but I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Kevin reached out once, about 3 months ago, a long email apologizing for any misunderstandings and asking if there might be a place for him at the company again. He'd been fired from the car dealership for falsifying sales records and was apparently struggling to find work. I didn't respond. Jake showed me Kevin's LinkedIn profile recently. He's listed himself as a business development consultant with expertise in corporate turnaround strategies. The irony almost made me laugh. One more thing worth mentioning. Last week, our biggest competitor reached out about acquiring Johnson Industrial Solutions. They offered $42 million. I told them no, not because I couldn't use the money, but because I built this company from the ground up, and nobody's taking it from me. Not my brother, not my father, not some corporate buyout firm looking for a bargain. This is mine. I earned it, and I'm keeping it. That's it for now, Reddit. Thanks for following along. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark.